And that's, as a coach, that's my job, to put him in position to make plays, to have an opportunity for us to win.
The Bengals are what feels far removed from the days in which fans were excited. Their quarterback just led them to a Super Bowl after shredding his knee the season previously, then going to an AFC championship the following year, losing to the Kansas City Chiefs. But everybody felt that this Bengals football team was ready to take the next step. Everybody felt this Bengals football team was going to be a force within the AFC. Now, a few years removed from that, the Bengals are sitting at a losing record with the same head coach, the same defensive coordinator, the same regime for the most part. And for a team that has had so much success over the past 3 seasons, 2 seasons, not losing a coordinators, still having your superstar quarterback, your 2-star receivers, that's a situation that most teams would kill for in the NFL. But yet and still, the Cincinnati Bengals are sitting here with more questions than answered. In this video, I'm going to break down how we got here, how we went from a team that was excited to have a new voice, a young head coach in there after 16 plus years with Marvin Lewis. And they endured some bad times with Zac Taylor, but how they got here. In this video, we're going to break down layer by layer what led to this point. So when Zac Taylor took over as the Cincinnati Bengals head coach, he talked about the utilization of every player and how he saw every player as a potential fit for this team and how he planned to make it work. When Zac first took over, obviously there was a deep search for the defensive coordinator position. They were searching every twist and turn that they could potentially find until they found Lou Anarumo, right? Defensive backs coach from the New York Football Giants, who Zac has a close relationship with back from their days in Miami together. And when that hire first took place, a lot of people were like, who is this guy? Who is this guy? What is he? What is he about? The whole 9 yards. Much like people were talking about Zac Taylor, because Zac Taylor's track record was failed at UC, didn't do well in Miami, went to the Rams, was able to reestablish himself, wide receivers coach, quarterbacks coach, gets a head coaching job. So people had a lot of question marks when it came to Zac Taylor, but the tag that came with him was he was young, he was innovative, and he was going to bring a fresh new face to Cincinnati. Now, with most rosters, when you change head coaches, there's going to be some turnover. There's going to be some faces that you need to move on from. The Bengals were in a stage in which they were moving on from the old guard, Marvin Lewis, right? But more so AJ Green, Andy Dalton, that whole era. And they were trying to enter into a new one. Zac Taylor needed to get his guys in here. Lou Anarumo needed to get their guys in there. And I think what was coming next, I don't know if a lot of people were expecting, it really did take a 2-season build to get them where they are right now, or where they were. Landing the first overall pick, slam dunk pick being Joe Burrow. That was ideal, right? But I think before going back to that, we got to think about it. Their first draft together was a whiff. There was a one probably building piece from that draft, which was a Jermaine Pratt, who they used to transform their defense. And then they drafted Drew Sample, who is like their H-back tight end guy, whatever the case may be. But the simple fact is that draft isn't what got them to this point. There were 2 pieces that are still on this team today, helped. But it really was that Joe Burrow draft. You drafted Joe Burrow with the first overall pick. You come back, you land T. Higgins at the wide receiver position. Then the defensive coordinator gets his guy that he wanted all along, right? And Logan Wilson in the 3rd round, Akeem Davis-Gaither in the 4th round. Guys that have had a lot of good years here in Cincinnati, guys that have put together a lot of good football years here in Cincinnati. But I also want to talk about the franchise's mindset, that year, right? That year, they realized, okay, our defense was putrid, Zac and Lou's first year. So what we're going to go out there and do is we're going to add veteran additions to guys that could really help this team. We had a need at defensive tackle. Obviously, you had the aging Geno Atkins, but you got DJ Reader. They added Mike Daniels, a guy that has had plenty of great years in Green Bay. Added a cornerback that was very talented in Trey Waynes, albeit he dealt with a lot of injuries here in Cincinnati, and added an safety that a lot of people felt like he had some good years ahead of him. He was limited from an athleticism standpoint in Von Bell, but it all made sense. A lot of the pieces they made were so critical, and one of the most important pieces that people don't talk about, in my opinion, was Josh Bynes, a guy that came in that was a mentor for guys like Logan Wilson and Akeem Davis-Gaither and Jermaine Pratt. He was the true middle linebacker the Bengals needed. They rid themselves of some of the veterans that they had in the past, guys like Drake Kirkpatrick, Andrew Billings, Nick Vigil, Darqueze Dennard, Clayton Fejedelem. But these pieces were guys that they felt could get them trending in the right direction. What do you know? Right before our very own eyes, the defense started to look a little better. The defense started to make some more plays. They still had guys like Carlos Dunlap, who was disgruntled on the team. They wound up getting rid of. But the defense started to show some hope. It wasn't the Terrell Austin defense that the Bengals were so pissed at anymore. It wasn't the first year Lou Anarumo defense that the Bengals couldn't even bear to watch, where teams were going up and down on them. They started to really come together and form something special. Obviously, Joe Burrow goes down with a torn ACL. The all offseason is, what is that going to look like? How can we make sure that, they can still put together a winning football team for their young franchise quarterback who they were super excited to have? There were question marks about Joe Burrow coming back, right, from the ACL injury, how it would look, what did he actually tear? I remember all those questions. But one thing that the Bengals did, they said, okay, we faltered again because Joe Burrow got hurt. We already have a young wide receiver in T. Higgins who we are very, very confident in. Well, the Bengals landed themselves the 5th overall pick that year, and they had a choice to make. All right. Penei Sewell, Jamar Chase. Well, the Bengals knocked it out of the park. They landed Jamar Chase. Right. Jamar Chase goes back with his college quarterback in Joe Burrow. And the vibes were high. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd still in the fold here in Cincinnati. This offense could be pretty good this year. Still question marks amongst the offensive line, but people ultimately felt good about where this Bengals offense could be. But the one thing the Bengals did is similarly what they started to do in 2020. They started to build back on the defense in the offseason. They added guys like Trey Hendrickson, who was coming off a very good year with the New Orleans Saints. A lot of people, when he first got added to Cincinnati, said, can he replicate that in Cincinnati? Will he have the same success in Cincinnati? I think everybody can agree that that pick, that addition turned out to be a great one. Larry Ogunjobi is a guy that they added, again, continuing to add to their defensive tackle room, realizing that they had to remake the room. Chidobe Awuzie, getting a true corner out there that was probably not utilized properly in Dallas, but came in and played amazing for Cincinnati. Truly played like one of the best corners in football. Mike Hilton, a huge addition for this defensive coaching staff, a veteran, a guy that knows the division, right? They lost guys like Christian Covington, Carl Lawson, William Jackson, Mackenzie Alexander. But you look at the additions that they made. They drafted a guy that people thought was a steal at the time in Joseph Ossai, Cam Sample. And then they said, okay, that was going to be our rotation. Those additions from 2020 and 2021 on the defense is what helped lead them to a Super Bowl. Those additions came so pivotal down the stretch. It got Lou Anarumo in talks for head coaching consideration around the league. He was the only defense coordinator that was able to figure out and solve the puzzle of Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. And he was able to do it in some of the more pivotal games. Which brings me to where we are sort of currently. Lou Anarumo's defense was predicated on an organization that was committed to fixing the defense. But much like most teams, players get old, players age, right? And you need to retool and replenish. Well, the Bengals were faced with a little bit of uncertainty going into the 22 year. We obviously had Jesse Bates' contract coming up and all this different stuff. Well, it was, were you going to resign Jesse Bates? And the Bengals didn't do that. Bengals instead slapped a franchise tag on him and put it off till next year. There were 0 veteran additions made in 2022. 0. And the drafting of Dax Hill was a premature move, expecting to potentially lose Jesse Bates. They also drafted Zach Carter that year, who's now cut on the Bengals. They drafted Tyson Anderson, who's dealt with injuries, turned into a fine special teams player, but has yet to see real playing time. That was 2022 season. That 2022 season, after they lost in the Super Bowl to the Rams, they've allocated a lot of those resources to fix the offensive line because the offensive line was horrid, and is arguably why they didn't hoist the Lombardi Trophy. But they forsake the defense in the process. They said, we're going to run it back with the same group that we have. Well, they went to the AFC Championship and they lost. And honestly speaking, I think the reason why they lost was outside of pass rush from Trey Hendrickson. They really, really lacked it on the opposite side. A situation that's really plaguing them to this day. They were hard pressed to really generate a pass rush, and they lost by a field goal to the Kansas City Chiefs. And then in that offseason that followed, they lost Jesse Bates, who was truly an elite player, a difference maker on their defense. He was really the engine that helped this thing tick. They lost guys like veteran guys that helped out, guys like Eli Apple, Von Bell, Trey Flowers. Here's my thought process. Where the Bengals went wrong more so than just the 2022 season is they put a huge emphasis on drafting leaders. That guys that had done it before, guys that have played in big games and big programs. But when it came time to pay those guys, when it came time to rely on those guys walked out the door. Every move after that was reactionary. Every last move was after that was reactionary. Losing Jesse Bates, you signed Nick Scott, who was majority a backup safety for most of his career. Then he just thrusted into the starting spot for the Rams. Then you add guys like Sidney Jones, who really didn't even see the field here in Cincinnati. You drafted guys like Miles Murphy, DJ Turner, Jordan Battle, albeit great picks, but you were asking them to come in and do an impossible task and play true veteran, minutes, essentially. You asked them to be those starters that you sort of relied upon, and you forsake what actually got you to where you are. It was being active in free agency. It was drafting and developing. And that's where the Bengals got where they are. Some of the pet draft picks that the Bengals had at their disposal early on, from T. Higgins, Logan Wilson, Akeem Davis-Gaither, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, those were easier picks to hit on. Why? Because they were early on the round. There were some whiffs in the process. The draft where you drafted Jamar Chase, you drafted Jackson Carman. And you look at some of the players that were on the board at the time, guys like Michael Wino. Those are ones that are going to be are sort of a tough pill to swallow when you think about it. And that's directly on the front office. It's clear to see where this thing fell off the road. It's that 2022 offseason. Complacency set in. Thinking that what got us here will keep getting us here. Not realizing you have to keep retooling. You have to keep reshuffling the deck. Which brings you to the 2024 offseason, where you lost DJ Reader. Arguably, Trey Hendrickson, DJ Reader, and Cheetah Baby Woozie were three of the most impactful free agents the Bengals had added. And they added them over a span of 2022 offseason and 2021 offseason. The defense being remade and playing at the level and creating opportunistic turnovers was all predicated on what you did in the 2020 offseason and the 2021 offseason. So now, those guys, meaning DJ Reader is out the door, Jesse Bates is out the door, and you're still trying to find a safety to replace Jesse Bates. You forgot your own mantra: draft, develop, and retain. You let that fall by the wayside. And you let that guy walk out the door. In 2024, it was a reactionary move. Sheldon Rankins replacing DJ Reader was a reactionary move to DJ Reader leaving. Geno Stone was a reactionary move because the Nick Scott signing fell flat on the face. But again, Geno Stone is a guy that you brought in because you're still trying to find the replacement to Jesse Bates. So then we're here, and people are asking the question now: should the Bengals move on from Lou Anarumo? And I get it. Men lie, women lie, numbers don't. Numbers, you are what your numbers say that you are. But here's the thing. I think this goes deeper than a Lou Anarumo. This goes deeper even maybe than a Zac Taylor. This is the organization having to ask themselves, how bad do you want a championship? And are you willing to do what it takes to bring a championship to Cincinnati? Complacency can't set in. Realizing this window, you will never have a quarterback probably like Joe Burrow again. You'll never have a receiver like Jamar Chase again. And both of them on the same team right now playing as great as they are. But that's how the Bengals got here. They rested on their laurels. They got complacent. For those of you that are calling for Lou's job, one thing I'll push back and I'll say is, I don't know if Lou has changed all that much from being the defensive coordinator that was getting head coaching consideration from teams like the Giants, teams like the Cardinals. I do think the talent around him has changed. He begged, pleaded probably to keep guys like Jesse Bates, keep guys like Von Bell when they were together, keep guys like DJ Reader. And I get it. You know, it's only so much money to go around. It's only so much money to go around. And you have to be able to coach and play with the players that you're given. But I think when we ask ourselves the question of why the defense has looked the way it's looked, or we call for someone's job, maybe it is the players. I see Terrell Austin right now as the Pittsburgh Steelers defensive coordinator, having currently ranked the third defense in the league. Might have changed a little bit, but having a top defense in the league. And when he was in Cincinnati, it was horrible, putrid. But the same players that Lou Anarumo had when he first got here, and what do you know? The defense was horrible, it was putrid. Get those players in the building. You add veteran additions, people that could genuinely help this team, and it looks a little bit different. Terrell Austin looks a little bit different as a defensive coordinator now because he has the players and the talent that he has in Pittsburgh. I don't think coaches just forget how to coach. I think that this situation is deep, and it goes to the front office, and it goes to the want to get better. I think that's what's let's put us in this position. Let's put us in the spot. So now you have to ask yourself this question, moving off of a Lou Anarumo and more to a big picture thing, the Zac Taylor thing. Zac Taylor currently holds a record as the Bengals coach of 41-52. You have to ask yourself, with a healthy Joe Burrow, with him having the season that he's having, can you envision that guy leading the team, getting everyone back on board for next season? If the answer is yes, you keep him. If you have a question mark about it, if you are hesitant, it's probably best to move off of him. The same could be said for Lou Anarumo. Ask yourself this question. Can Lou Anarumo, with the pieces he's been given, can he turn this thing around if the Bengals front office makes a concerted effort to fix the defense in the offseason? If the answer is yes, you keep him. If you're unsure, you move on. For me, the way I feel about it, if you keep Zach, you should keep Lou. That's genuinely how I feel about it. And the reason why I've come to this is because I've seen Lou take a bad defense, get his own pieces in here, and turn it around. I've seen it happen. If you still say you believe in this coaching staff, you still believe in Zac Taylor as the head coach, and Zach says he believes in Lou, I think you should keep the guy. I believe that because I've seen him turn things around. Regardless, though, who the defensive coordinator is, changes are necessary. Changes are needed. This defense is in need of new life. There has not been a notable addition in free agency on the defensive side of the ball since Trey Hendrickson, and that was back in 2021. We're almost in 2025. There has not been one notable addition on this defense since 2021. So the question comes, how do you fix it? I think the one thing that has hurt this team over time is knowing when to say when. Knowing when to move off of guys that have been here way too long. They've done it in the past. Moving off of guys like Sam Hubbard has to happen. Moving off of guys like Sheldon Rankins has to happen. Moving off of guys like Geno Stone has to happen. Ridding yourself of those contracts have to happen. You have the T. Higgins question mark that comes up. If you're operating like a functioning organization that wants to win, you tag and trade him. You don't let T. Higgins walk out the door and you get absolutely nothing for him. That'll be malpractice. If the Bengals want to reopen this window, this is the most pivotal offseason to do so. You have question marks on the defense. You have question marks as far as the head coach. as far as the staff goes. Those have to be answered first. But some of the quick moves that you could make in order to open up your window are some of the ones I've just stated. Also, you have to have a real question regarding a Duke Tobin. Or hell, maybe you have to have a real question about adding the GM title to someone that can handle those responsibilities. Because it might look a little bit different if you change your stripes. But just how quickly were you on top of the mountain? Look how quickly you got back to where you were just a few seasons ago. The only difference is this is even a more messed up situation because you do have that superstar quarterback. You do have that superstar wide receiver. You do have that other star wide receiver. You do have that elite pass rusher. And you find yourself in the same situations. We said a while ago, situational coaching matters, but also situational roster management matters. The ability to keep your core together that you went to a Super Bowl with is so pivotal. And they must have lost that somewhere in the process. But I think this offseason is where the Bengals have to have a deep conversation with themselves and say, what do we want this to look like? How bad do we want to bring a championship to Cincinnati? It's clear something needs to change. Your quarterback has said it. Your wide receiver has said it. Members of the media have said it. Now it's time for y'all to recognize it and realize this was a wasted season. And it's because of the moves that have plagued this team through the last few seasons or lack thereof. Free agency is for the now. Drafting is for the future. And when you draft, you develop and you retain. You don't just do one out of the three. You have to be committed as a franchise to wanting to win, to wanting to bring a championship to Cincinnati. There's no room for complacency. And so, again, the questions that are coming up in the offseason is, how bad do you want to win? How much do you want to bring a championship to Cincinnati? It starts with you. It starts with the front office. Let me know down in the comment section what you guys think. If you like more video content like this, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you guys never miss when we go live or when we upload content from the TWSN studios.